One of the most common concerns we always receive at SkillCapped is how the strategies we preach won't ever work in low ELO. Sure, it's good to do in high ELO, but my horrible teammates will never follow up on what you're teaching, so I shouldn't even try. And the topic we get the most pushback on this has got to be split pushing. There's a billion concerns we see whenever we bring up split pushing. But what if my team yada yada yada? Now, if any of those thoughts immediately crept into your mind when we brought up split pushing, then that's what this video is for. We're not here to cover how to split push, as we've already done that in multiple guides for every role, but rather why you should be doing so more often, even if you think it's wrong in low ELO. Caring about what your teammates may or may not do when you split push most likely stems from a poor mindset, which is that you probably care way too much about each specific game's result. Unless you're giga smurfing, which we do try to teach you how to do on a daily basis, it does very little to stress about the outcome of each and every game. League is a 5v5 match, and although your actions do matter, you don't have complete control over the end result. Honestly, if you queue up for a game after school or work at 4:51 p.m., you might get the best 4 teammates you'll ever encounter. Likewise, if you queue up at 4:52 p.m., then you might get a group of players who argue the whole game, eventually leading to an inevitable loss. Point is, if the outcome can often be decided by external factors out of your control, then why not use your time in each game more efficiently to learn? If your goal is to really improve, then each game you play shouldn't be about winning the specific game you're playing right now, but to improve for the next 50,000 games you'll play before you eventually quit when you're 80 years old. Now, if you agree with that or already thought in that way, then how does this all tie back into split pushing? Well, that's easy, because splitting or just being on your own in the game is quite likely the fastest way of improving. When isolated, you're in complete control over everything that happens around you at all times. For example, maybe as an ADC you're having a great game, and you can actually duel most enemy champions that come close to you. But as you split by yourself, the fed enemy Aurelia comes to ruin your fun. As an ADC in a team fight versus a strong Aurelia, it's hard to not just flame the person who fed her. There's almost nothing you can do when she just runs in a straight line towards you during a Baron fight. In a split push scenario though, control over everything that happens around you is your responsibility. Aurelia only killed MF here since she wasn't tracking her on the map appropriately. That's a pretty easy lesson to learn. Now, Miss Fortune knows that she needs to be way more vigilant about where Aurelia is and avoid her as much as possible. Not only do you learn macro faster when you know every consequence is your fault, but you improve your mechanics quicker through split pushing instead of team fighting. Think about it, there's so much going on your screen when you're team fighting. You have to track the abilities of 9 other champions near your vicinity. Not only is it overwhelming, but it's also non-repetitive. Every game's team fights differ so much from each other that you'll rarely find yourself in similar fights from previous games. That's a problem, since the best way to learn a skill in any game or in real life is through repetition. It's hard to do that if team fights are always so chaotic and random. Meanwhile, when you're on your own or in small skirmishes, it's much easier to digest information on how to play fights out better. The situations you find yourself in are likely to repeat in the future. Let's take a look at an example. Here's a fairly fed Orianna getting into a series of 1v1s and 1v2s while Yuumi just hitches a ride on her. First up is the enemy Ezreal. Orianna can already take away a big lesson from her encounter here. Look at her mouse clicks. A lot of them are so far away from her own character that she's not able to react to most of Ezreal's cues and dodge all of them. Her mouse movement isn't horrible, but could definitely be a lot closer to her own character to help react to his skill shots easier. After the Ezreal goes down, next up is Echo. He tries to close the gap on them with his E, but it runs out before he reaches Orianna. An Echo who has his E down is pretty worthless, so even though she's super low on health, Orianna can fight back and force him to ult away. The next challengers are Pyke and Yasuo. As they chase, Orianna thinks about what makes Pyke so threatening. His hook and stun come to mind. Well, with this much movement speed, it's impossible to ever get stunned by Pyke, so the only threat left is his hook, which Ori has an easy answer for. Once Orianna reaches her minions, look how she immediately turns around. With the wave and her movement speed, both of his threatening abilities are irrelevant, which means she can stand her ground for a moment and chunk him away. Now, Yasuo is the threat. Well, Orianna knows that you can't outrun a Yasuo through a minion wave, so she kites away from it. As she gets flashed on, Tryndamere joins the fray. Kiting away, Orianna makes another crucial mistake. She misclicks her combo and even walks into the Yasuo for a bit afterwards. Not only that, but afterwards as she's kiting Tryndamere, she stands still for an auto attack. Is this auto attack really worth the risk that Tryndamere catches up to her? Probably not. Nevertheless, she ends up barely living and winning the entire skirmish with the help of Yuumi at her side. Looking back throughout the fight, it's clear that there are past experiences that Oriana is drawing from when she's fighting her opponents. That being said, she can also walk away from this entire skirmish knowing that her mouse control definitely needs a bit of work, especially during those key moments when she's under pressure. Compare that to a team fight where everything is so random and chaotic that it's hard to get a clear takeaway each fight on what you need to improve on. It's generally hard to learn concrete specific concepts. Usually you'll just have vague ideas like I need to position better, and that's only if you can resist the urge to flame the rest of your team for failing so miserably. And let's just make something very clear before moving further. Yes, adapting this mindset and going off on your own or split pushing most games will lose you a lot of matches. Unless you're doing it properly and outplaying your opponents, you won't have the pressure you need to win, and more often than not your teammates will collapse on the other side of the map. That being said, losing while learning more efficiently is much better for long-term progression. Think about it this way. Say you play things safe every game. You group up with your teammates all the time. You're always there for team fights and there to back them up in case they try to get themselves into trouble. Playing safe gets you a 51 to 54% win rate. Let's say that's a 52% for you. If your MMR is stable with a plus 14 LP for wins and minus 14 for losses, after 100 games you will have climbed to 56 LP total. That is 100 hours worth of queue time, champion selects, dodges, remakes, etc. 100 hours for 56 LP. That's steady climbing for sure, but compare that to a player who is constantly putting themselves in difficult situations and learning more and more, and they will skyrocket in LP comparatively. The final thing we want to say is that it's easy for us to say, just don't care about losing, bro. Easier said than done for most people. Thus, our final bit of advice is actually to get a smurf to queue up on. Regardless of what stage of the game you're playing, it's easier to make decisions that you know might lose you the game if you're on a smurf where your LP doesn't matter as much, right? But more importantly, smurfing helps with something else: confidence. The most important thing about being on your own is having the ability to outplay the one or two people who are trying to defend you. If you're not confident that you can beat them, then you'll never be good at split pushing, since you'll just run away from every encounter. Especially if you're playing something that doesn't fend for itself very well, such as an ADC or a control mage. But smurfing against players below your true ELO can help you gain confidence you need to realize when you can actually take those fights on your own. Then, as you slowly but surely climb to your main's ELO, you'll retain your confidence even against equally skilled players, and you'll take fights you normally wouldn't have otherwise. Many people often disregard smurfing as just an ego thing to stomp lower skilled players, but it can definitely be used to your advantage when learning new skills. If you think it'd help you specifically, then we'd highly recommend it. Alright guys, before we wrap this up, let's tell you a little more about SkillCapped. So, we offer a 5-division rank up guarantee, and think that's a pretty crazy thing to offer. It's like a gym membership guaranteeing you'll get ripped. Your local gym would go bust if they offered that, right? Not us. We've offered this for years because our service really does work. It works so well, in fact, that we're able to produce by far the largest catalog of premium league guides on the internet. We add over 20 videos a week, with over 1,600 guides curated into over 100 courses no one can compare. We've also sent challenger players into ELO Hell 714 times and counting, where they commentate how to carry live. They also respond to all questions asked. Sign up today for as little as $4.99 a month if you are serious about improving. To wrap things up, guys, we're not saying that you shouldn't ever group with your team, but don't do so out of fear that they're going to int or troll otherwise. Do so when you actually believe it's the correct thing to do. More often than not, though, correct macro is being on your own in a side lane, almost regardless of what you're playing. You need to get comfortable being alone in games so you can improve faster than everyone else. Anyways, thanks for watching, and see you guys next time.